If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. If by Rudyard Kipling.
Thank you, Joe. Wonderful. All right, I don't know where to begin. So folks, if you would like to talk about why you like this poem, or what do you like about this poem? Let's start by asking a question. You know, if you do like this is a question for people who like the poem. Why do you like this poem? Why is this poem one of your favorites? Go ahead and type exclamation mark in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. I'm going to start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Sure, I think that's, well, I mean, I think it provides you a guideline, some guidelines for the ideal. And this poem is especially meaningful to me, and I was mentioning this, even growing up, this was always a meaningful poem to me. But it took on a new meaning when I mentioned a little bit earlier that Greg and Massimo had asked us to write our own Enchiridion. And for those that are unfamiliar with the Enchiridion, it's just 53 short chapters with a couple paragraphs on how to apply practical philosophy to everyday life. And I was thinking about how to approach that. And I went back to the poem If. And what I did is I looked at the principles and the virtues that were actually captured in the poem and took what was written in the poem and applied it to my everyday life. So the meaning for me is that I was able to take this and make it very practical in meaningful ways. So I think one of the obvious ones is that the way I would look at it is if you I'm trying to think of one of the best examples would probably if you can, or being lied about and don't deal in lies is probably the easiest one because it's a very obvious one. So the virtue and the principle that I looked at was justice. And that's very important to, if you're thinking about it in Stoic terms. But then you have to think through why it's important not to lie. And once you go through that process, it really allows you to come to different conclusions. You really think through logically because people won't trust you, because you'd be going down to the same level as other individuals. And this is what it means to live a virtuous life. To meet triumph and disaster and meet and treat those two imposters the same. That is also, it's critical that you have temperance and that you don't allow your achievements or your failures lead you to despair or an irrational amount of euphoria where you're acting and you're losing sight of why you did something in the first place. So there's what I'm taken by the most with this particular poem is just how much wisdom and how few lines in each stanza. I mean, there is, and to say something simply is one of the hardest things to do. So when you're talking about speaking about your principles, you can map principles to each one of these lines. And this serves as an example of how you then can apply a practical situation to your life. And I think that's why the poem, if for me, has such a deep meaning, is because it's practical wisdom. And I think that it actually gives us an opportunity to really think about our everyday actions as opposed to being just a beautiful poem.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. I mean, the amount of wisdom that has been packed into this poem is stunning.
Yeah.
That's the thing that stands out in my mind. So folks, the question on the table now is, why do you like this poem? Next up is going to be Fahad, Evanik, Max, and Maritza. Fahad.
Well, like the two meanings that really like stands for me, and like I'm very fascinated by how powerful they are. Patience and saying the truth. Like patience, like I haven't seen any person who's really successful in anything without patience. And you feel patience is just kind of the norm of nature. And if we align our mind with that, like if you want to raise a family, you have to be patient. If you want to pursue a degree, you have to be patient. There is nothing very much like meaningful you pursue and you'll be able to achieve without having that patience. And oh man, like us as human, like this is very difficult. It's very hard. Like I say that I watch myself. I say like, man, sometimes just like you go and if you let yourself to do what like your emotion want to do or your temptations, you just want to go off the rail. But when you keep remind yourself like your ultimate goals and the things that you want to achieve, and with all of that, actually, like I feel being content, not necessarily happiness, is the goal. Like that's what you want to kind of all the time remind yourself. Like I would rather what I want to be in the future, how my mind and my heart will feel if I chose this path of being patient and achieve these meaningful things, or I go after my impulsive pleasures or the things that I want to do. So yeah, that one is like one of the things that recently all the time I just like very fascinating, and how people, they cannot just, like you see family, they get broken up, or you got, and some people, they couldn't finish their goals or to fulfill their potential, which is one of the most disappointing thing, to be honest, not to fulfill your potential. The other one is lying and the truth.
Can I just say something? I think this is just beautiful, Fahad. I mean, patience actually captures it. I had never thought of it that way, but I think the word patience and the way in which you've talked about it, I think captures a core part of this poem very pithily. So thank you. Please go on.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure like you doing this meetup, you had wonderful amount of patience, because I'm sure it wasn't smooth sailing. but you're persistent and you waited. And I'm sure like many lives have been affected by this, because it's very meaningful thing, and it's not easy to be persistent on doing certain things on like for that long. The other one is saying the truth. It's very sometime again, it's somehow connected to the patients in a certain way. But saying the truth, I found that in different traditions. Like I have very good background about Islamic traditions. And I know, and I found, and I like to observe different traditions, Christianity and different, I found you can actually, you can steal, you can do things. But I notice in these traditions, they want the people not to lie. And the reason behind it, like I was listening to Jordan Peterson on this, because once you start doing that, you want to actually replace reality, and you want to live in another world. And that's very dangerous thing. And that's going to put you in very bad place and make the society around you cannot deal with you. So it's very corrupting in how you deal with yourself and how you deal with the world around you. So you can get very short-term benefits of lying, but again, that's how it's connected to patience. If you are looking for long-term contents and happiness, you have to stick to the reality and say the truth and be truthful to yourself and people around you. That's all, and thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Fantastic. Thank you. Next up is Evanique, Max, and Maritza. Evanique.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me with this poem is this, I think it's the second paragraph, or, the second set. Is if you can make one leap of all your winnings and risk it one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve to sin, that's all I want to say. And I think what that tells me is like it's so much about how you handle your wins and your losses, your good times and your bad times, and how you don't complain about it. It's like you keep it moving and you keep it going. It's like you don't look for the happiness, you look for how you deal with all of life. And then that's what this poem really speaks to me. It says to me is, how do you deal with all your life? Are you like proud and boastful when you win and you think you get prideful? And then when you lose, do you blame it on everybody else? Do you put it on everybody else? Or do you take responsibility for it? And I think that is the most impactful thing. So that's all I had to say on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And this connects with the point observation that Joe was making, that at the root, this is the Stoic attitude. You're saying that you're making a very clear distinction between what is in your control and what is not within your control. And you're not getting too hung up on things that are not within your control. And you're coming back to the root of that is in your control and working on that. And that is the thing that is supporting you, not the achievements or the failures that are there around you. Thank you. Next up is going to be Max, Maritza, Allison, Jean, Devesh, Lloyd, and Donna, and then Joe. Max.
Okay, great. Great input so far. Yeah, I would like to kind of second what and kind of expound upon what Joe touched upon. To me, this poem is Stoicism incarnate. So one thing that I really take from it, and I think it sums up kind of the totality of it for me, would be the lack of attachment to outcome. So over and over again, you hear the theme of something happening and the author not being so attached with like the result. So even if you produce the truth, and the people can twist it and turn that into a trap for fools. Like that's not something within their control, and they're releasing that really quickly. So that really stood out to me, and how much he's prioritizing his values and like eternal values versus ephemeral circumstances. So things like wins and losses, these are all things that can turn and kind of twist in time. Whereas the virtues that he's talking about, patience, justice, and a lot of the stoic virtues, these things are more eternal, and they're more like what's the word, like they're more personalized. That's something that no one else can take from you, kind of the way you perceive things. And finally, just being able to watch things taken from you, and things that, as you just said, Shakant, things that are outside your control, and just being able to like let go of them. I think it's just really big, because in life that's a very hard thing to watch, especially the truth, because you see it all the time when people believe that they're correct, when people believe that they are telling the truth. You've seen it like with imperialism, you've seen it with colonialism, you've seen it with the people when they bring in like God and they're trying to save people. Once they feel like they have the truth, watching that being taken away from you or misrepresented is really painful. So if you can get to this point, I truly believe that would be like manhood, as the author said.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Max. And I think, the theme of stoicism that Joe started on, I think that's a core theme here. Wonderful. Next up is going to be Maritza, Allison, and Joe. Maritza.
To me, this poem, it's very prominent in the concept of perseverance, is what I see. I would just like to point out, so that, from the poem written aspect of it all, it is it's got, the ABABCDCD rhythm to it, which creates for us kind of a reinforcing pattern. And he also uses the device of the repetitiveness of if to kind of instill in us almost a hopeful atmosphere. I view it as a poem for hope and perseverance, and it's kind of like something to aspire to, if one can. Also, and it's possible that I see this admonition in everything, but honestly, I really do see in this poem the admonition for caution against excess in either direction. He's trying to remind us ever, but although a couple other folks have mentioned it, there are many heavy intonations of stoicism here. So from that aspect, it would make sense that I'm seeing a call for balance in our day-to-day. I feel like this is a great poem to kind of pull out and read when we're feeling like we're oscillating all over the place and we're directionless, because it gives you a grounding, set of principles, as it were. And so I'm quite the fan. It's very cleanly done, even though he's definitely giving you guidelines for how to live. It doesn't feel preachy, even though it kind of is. So it's a great poem. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marisa. I particularly like your observation about the if. So firstly, if as a device which shows all of these things in parallel. It's not that you just have to be all of these. So they using that mechanism to kind of do the repetition part. Secondly, if. What is if? Like if is basically pointing you to possibilities, and saying that, these are the possibilities. And if these are the possibilities, then what are you going to do? So it is expanding your context instead of just living your life, kind of with your nose to the ground without thinking about things. This is kind of opening up the possibilities first and then saying, then what do you need to do? So it is a way of kind of stepping back from your life and looking at your life as in a much larger perspective. Thank you. Next up is Allison, Joe, and Jean. Allison.
I remember reading this poem a lot in high school, and I always really loved it. But I noticed things this time rereading it. One thing I noticed was that the stanzas were organized around different themes. So I think the first stanza was really all about not giving into other people's opinions of you and not being swayed by what, like, if they're lying, you don't need to lie. If they're hating, you don't need to hate. I think the second one was really about dreams and about goals. The third one was really about taking chances. And then the fourth one is really about being humble and about ethics. But what really spoke to me the most was the third one, because and I like when it says, if you can make one leap on all your, if you can make one heap on all your winnings and risk it on one pitch and toss and lose and start again at the beginning. So it's saying, don't just be willing to take chances, because it's the only way you really achieve what you want. And then also, especially like the last part where it says, and so hold on when there's nothing in you except the will, which says to them, hold on. And I just really like that, because there are times when you just want to completely give up entirely, and saying, just keep going. You have to just keep going no matter what. And so it's a really great poem, and I understand it a lot more now than I did when I was younger, but it's interesting that it spoke to me a lot, even as a young teenager. Yeah.
In some ways, this is connected to how, we've been looking at Tao Te Ching, and it talks about returning to the root, returning the core, and moving from there. It is about that. It is saying that there is stuff happening outside, but your core is still there, no matter what. And you can always go back to it and start over, start going out from it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Next up is Joe, Jean, and Divyesh. Joe.
Yeah, I just want to build on a couple of very, very good points that have already been made, is specifically Max and Dr. Vahid's. Specifically, when you're having, what's very interesting to see is you have virtue here in every line. You can see it in every line. And if that is your goal, that's the way you actually achieve a certain degree of tranquility. And the other part about it, on the other end of it, is not being tied to outcomes, as Max has already said. So what if you really boil it down, you can boil it down to your principles. And that is a critical part of Stoicism. That means internally, you're looking at, how do I live my life virtuously? And then everything else will come along with it. And I think one other important part is that when going through this poem, a lot of times in Stoicism, you will look at what's in your control and what's not in your control. Obviously, you look at that all the time. But this really calls out how much is really in your control. This really explains, this is a list of, it's almost an if-then statement, like a mathematical proof of how much control you actually have over your own life. And and that to me is something you're often thinking about, what's outside of your control in order to stay on point. But this is a reversal of that, where you're really looking at internally just how much control you do have over yourself, which is not always called out in Stoicism. It's always, a lot of times you're looking at what are the externals and what you need to be indifferent to and how you need to react to certain situations as well. And just finally, I think that the cardinal virtues actually almost line to each one of these stanzas, almost to each line. If you were to say even patience, which is critical to this poem, it's a subset of temperance essentially. So I think that there's a lot of ways to dice this poem up. I'm enjoying everybody's feedback.
Thank you, Joe. So we're going to go with Jean next, but I would like to ask for a volunteer to read the poem again. So if you would like to read the poem, just go ahead and type R in the chat. Okay, next up is Jean.
Yeah, so first I actually like to share a sunset with all you guys.
Thank you. Wait a minute, sunset happened 3 hours ago.
Not here. Yeah, so this poem is pretty interesting. Actually, when I hear the poem, I think mostly 道德经 somehow. And it reminds me about a phrase in Chinese called 不以物喜，不以己悲. That means you never be overjoyed by materials, or you never feel sorry for yourself. So I think it shows, you know, they use different contrast. It's very like 道德经 and how you deal with it. And also it's like Jordan Peterson mentioned about the internal standard. Like when you draw a map, you have this internal truth, then all this doesn't really matter. The success, the failure, it doesn't really make any difference. That's why you don't really feel, you can lose everything. It doesn't make any difference to you. So you can throw everything out and you don't feel sorry about yourself. I think that's very different perspective. Then you judge your success through external wills. Then you see, oh, I lose this, I don't have control of this. But when you have this internal map, it doesn't make any difference. Either succeed or fail. It just, you know, it just a symptom, the phenomenon. So it doesn't affect who you are. That's how I see it. Thank you.
Wonderful. I like your phrase at the end. It doesn't affect who you are. So that was great. All right, Rupali, if you could read the poem, please.
Sure. Thank you. If by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or been lied about, don't deal in lies, or been hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear what the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they're gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Wonderful. Rupali, what do you think about this poem? Why do you like this poem?
So much like Allison said, you know, I read this poem when I was in school. And since then, first, I think in school it was the rhythm probably. But this last part, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. To me, that was just very beautiful. There's so much that is out there, right? That you can have if you just have the right attitude towards life. And although this poem, like Maritza said, is about instruction and teaching, it doesn't have the preachiness about it. To me, it's very uplifting. And as I think where I am in my phase of life, I feel that we do go through ups and downs, and it's normal. These are like everybody goes through ups and downs in life. And how do you deal with that rhythm of life? With, you know, with courage, with belief, with patience, with imagination, yet be grounded in reality, have balance and seek truth. I mean, all of these qualities then make you the person to be able to enjoy life and just go for life. I think that's the spirit I feel in the poem. So it's my favorite poem. And Joe, thank you so much for doing this. Shrikant, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Rupali. Now I'm going to take this opportunity to brag a little bit. Rudyard Kipling is from Bombay, my hometown. Okay, and the feeling that I get from this poem is actually a sense of adventure. You know, looking at life as an adventure. I don't see it as, okay, somehow I'll put up with it. It is a sense of adventure. And that's what I get from other Rudyard Kipling stories too. It is a sense that this world is very fascinating. There is a lot to be done, lot to be explored, but there are going to be ups and downs, and that's an adventure. And I choose to engage in that adventure. Thank you, Rupali. Next up is going to be Divesh. Let's see, Divesh, Donna, Lloyd, and Becky. Divesh.
Hi, thanks for this wonderful session. I think somebody else is from Australia, so it's our morning here. And thank you for this, and at a good time for us, 11 a.m. or whatever. But yeah, I think there's so many things here, and my normal tendency, which is nothing that good or bad, but it's coming from a thinking perspective, the one thing I see is a call for nobility of spirit, and it's a wonderful call. And yet, in my case, not yet, but in my case, there's always the tendency to see, yes, it's wonderful, it's calling, I'm drawn to the wisdom, I first of all intellectually see what it is, but it's also a visceral call from the heart, how to live, how to give an ode to this nobility of spirit. But what comes up also within me is, yes, but Divyesh, what are the hindrances in you to all of this? And Shrikant, you mentioned at some point, you said, if can equal possibilities here. And I've lived a lot of my life in this possibilities, normally with a catastrophic outcome thinking, rather than the possibility of optimism or growth or joy or adventure, as you mentioned. So I don't know. So it was a setting in my default thinking. But the wonderful thing is everything can be subject.
Sorry, Divesh, I think we've lost your sound. Guys, can you hear? No? Okay. Divesh, we've lost your sound. So I'm going to go to the next person. And whenever you fix your sound, you can go ahead and continue. Okay. Donna, you're next. Donna, you need to unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry, I got cut off.
Okay, sorry. Divesh, go ahead. Please continue.
Sorry about our links here. Yeah, so this call wasn't, for me, it was the hindrances in my personal thinking and being. And believe me, while I was reading this, I'm going, oh yeah, but are you up to it? Are you this? Are you that? It's a wonderful thing because it points to my own limited thinking to all these possibilities. And yet it's like a hand in, if I'm in a well and there's a hand up there trying to get you out, it's calling like a hand to draw you out of the well. And it's a beautiful way to put it. And one of the things that struck me to the heart here was, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they're gone, it's asking for a legacy. It's asking for your legacy. What is your legacy going to be while you're alive? Long after you're gone, what is going to happen? How will I be, not in an ego narcissistic, but how do you want to be remembered? And it goes very well with well, you'll be a man. might sound a little bit outdated. You can be a woman, but it's just that you'll be a person in your own eyes. You'll have a great comfort and joy in your own being. And it's a wonderful, and it also goes well with something else I'm doing concurrently, the Bhagavad Gita and the chapter 14 of the Gita. I don't know whether it's in chapters, but the way we're doing it, and it is asking, like, in that sense, there's a God figure called Krishna, and he holds the hand. He goes, I want to be the authoritative figure for you to the guy Arjuna, but what I'll do is let's show you how to be a Purusha, a man. And it's a wonderful, wonderful poem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devesh. Excellent comments. There are two things that stand out. I love the term nobility of spirit. I think that's what stands out over here. The second thing, which is a more complex point, is that you're right. All great works of art are like mirrors. So you look into the mirror and you find out where you are. You see what you have already done, what you're already doing, and what you're not doing. Mm-hmm. And it is like, you're looking in the mirror. And the interesting thing is that I have read this poem off and on over many, many years. And just like great work of art, which is like a complex mirror, it's not a simple mirror, it's a complex mirror. So depending on what you've been doing and how you've been growing or not growing, you see different things when you look into it. It changes depending on your mood, even during the day. Uh-huh. And that's the power of it. It makes you more self-reflective. It asks you questions, and invites you to do soul searching. So thank you very much. Great points, Devesh. Next up is going to be Donna, Lloyd, Becky, and Mike. Donna.
Thank you. And, just building a little bit on what the previous speaker said, he was talking about the definition of a man or woman or person, a whole person, in the Bhagavad Gita, I guess. But that term also reminded me of the Jewish word mensch for a well-rounded, person. And just thought, and also you stole the idea of nobility that I was about to mention. I thought that
Donna, you feel free to repeat it. That idea bears a lot of repetition. So please
repeating. Thank you. But I'm glad someone else saw it, because to me, I've loved this poem all my life, and I'm so glad you selected it. And I too feel that Rudyard Kipling always has a sense of adventure and fun and inspiration about his works. But at first, when I was going to say something, three things stuck out for me. One of them was the encouragement to maintain an even keel. And it was mentioned by another person, temperance, which I think is another good example of that. And then to be persistent, which someone else said was perseverance, which was good. But also to maintain a nobility in your aspirations and in your demeanor is what I was going to say about nobility. But that concept of being noble about it, trying to rise up instead of descend to the depths. And that nobility and rising up should be your North Star. And as far as the part that hit me the most personally, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop to build them up again with worn out tools, boy, that's what pisses me off. When somebody misquotes me and misuses what I'm trying to do, And I think that's also an ode for our times. I feel like our current times are so lacking in the appreciation and the value of truth morality, values, character. It just seems like, who cares? Doesn't matter. And so really to stoop and build again the value, the foundation of right and wrong and good and bad, and what is uplifting versus destroying. So I think this poem speaks to all of that. And when you mentioned, depending on what mood you're in, also what circumstances you're in, I mean, it's a very useful, universal type of help tool.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. And I want to, the point that you made about current culture is absolutely true. See, great works of art from another time hold up. They are like beacons.
Yeah.
That kind of shine, that are there up there, and they're there all the time for anybody to see.
Yes.
And it is very easy to get carried away by the culture around you, the people around you. It's very easy for us human beings to do that. And what great art like this does, it allows you to kind of step back and get a perspective on things. Because otherwise you are kind of doing this fighting skirmishes instead of seeing that there is kind of fundamental things that are missing from this entire picture. It gives you a perspective about what is possible for human beings. Thank you. Thank you. Next up is Lloyd, Becky, and Mike. Lloyd.
Thanks, Shrikant. I never had a chance to read this in school, high school nor college. I guess, there are other things to look at, but I do have a personal connection to this poem because my dad, God rest his soul, used to say, walk with kings, but have the common touch. A slight paraphrase of Kipling. So first of all, it's nice for me to know that's where that came from. I never knew, he just said it to me and it was like, oh, wow, that's so clever. So it's nice to know the source is Kipling, but he said that to me a number of times. And the way I took it was really to kind of be able to relate to all people, high and low, not to be in an ivory tower kind of academia, unable to relate to the common man. And I can't remember the occasions that he said it to me on. It was too long ago. But I do remember him saying, walk with kings, but have the common touch. And that stuck with me. I always just thought, try to do both. You could, you counsel a king, and you could also talk to the court or the folks outside, or whatever. But I think it was helpful, to me to understand that ability to communicate well with all kinds of people. So I have a real personal connection to that line.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Lloyd. See, that is the power of, again, great art, that a line can serve as this very fond connection between generations. And it is so full of meaning. It's not just a particular thing, but it is so full of meaning, kind of living meaning. So beautiful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Becky, followed by Mike. Becky.
The first time I heard this poem was when you read it, Shrikant, in one of the other meetups. And so here are my thoughts. People will misunderstand you in life, but it doesn't matter as long as you understand yourself. That happens from being rooted in your principles and staying the course according to your convictions. Have humility as one of your core values, to consider the validity of others' criticism, to make allowance for their doubting too. Be on guard from the sway of people, but also alert against the enticement of achievements and status. Who you are is your internal standards. Develop the virtue inside yourself and give back to the world. How do you test your internal strength and development? By analyzing your actions. With people, do you lie when others slander you? With achievements, do you continue taking risks, acknowledging failures as more informative than possibly knowing how something is successful? With status, do you treat people with consistency, knowing that there's more similarity than differences between the kings and the commoner? And back to the point of the title, if, this is a formula. Be honest and know how you measure to the standard. If you want this, then do these things and you will become one that withstands the hardships of life and be strong enough to give back.
Wow. Becky, this is magnificent. I mean, that I would encourage everybody, I'd not thought of that, but I would encourage everybody to actually write in response to Kipling, as if he was speaking to you. You kind of capturing the meaning in your own words. I think that it's a fantastic way of communing with a piece of art, that you do your own version of it. And what that does is that it not only it gives you the appreciation of it. Like Leonardo used to say, if you want to learn how to see, then draw. Because what happens is that that loop that you establish between you're trying to capture something, have you captured it? Oh no, it should be like this. I can make it better this way. This is more powerful. This speaks to me more. That process is a very powerful way of appreciating anything. So I encourage everybody to write, so Becky, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. Fantastic.
I took that from you, Shrikant, because you're always saying, you take these ideas, you break it down, and then you make it your own. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky. But it was just like a very dramatic example of that. I had not thought of doing that for this particular poem, and that's kind of I'm not that so this is relative. I do this all the time for everything. Like if I'm reading a book or if I'm reading like Tao Te Ching, I'm writing my own versions of it, and that's the only way I can grasp it. That's the only way I can make it my own and say, okay, how will I express it? This one is particularly challenging, okay, because it is so broad, and like the point that Maritza made, that it is not really preachy in its tone. It has a moral, but it is not preachy because it is just laying out, these are the possibilities, and this is what is a good thing to do with it. And look at where you end up if you do that. So, so thank you so much, Becky. Next up is Mike.
Okay, I concur with everything everybody has said. I have liked this poem for a long time, since elementary school. And I've used it for inspiration of myself and to inspire others. I want to present a little bit different view on one aspect of it. And one thing you can say is, if you are doing all this thing, the concluding line could be that you may not understand the problem space. And there may be some times when you should consider risk reward and go do something else. And that the never, ever, ever quit, give up is kind of one of the reasons why the British Commonwealth was dissolved rather than converted into a more loosely organized confederation where everybody cooperated. So there's an aspect of risk reward and an aspect of you need to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And in some respects, that applied to Britain and England. Kipling was a journalist supporting the colonial model, and this country has had a certain amount of elements of that in how we've handled some of our problems.
Thank you.
So that might be another thread to follow in this. But
thank you.
Without
Thank you, Mike.
diluting the inspirational aspects of it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. So next, what we are going to do is that I want to read through the poems stanza by stanza. And if anybody has comments about that stanza, any aspect, let's try to keep the comments brief. So many people, we get many different voices talking about each of the stanzas. Okay, so we're going to go through the poem stanza by stanza. Who would like to read the first stanza? Go ahead and type R if you would like to read the first stanza. And then everybody is welcome to give their thoughts about that stanza. So we're going to go stanza by stanza. Katie, go ahead.
The first stanza. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. Go ahead and anybody who wants to talk about what stands out for them. You're not trying to summarize the paragraph, just things that mean something to you, any part of it. So we'll go with Jean, Donna, Kevin, and Mary. Jean.
Yeah, I think this actually shows the guy is pretty calm and not emotional reactive, which is actually what I'm working on right now. So I found him very emotional reactive dealing with my client. So I was listening to, oh, this was I really should do. So I think keep the emotional calm, not disturbed by others' reaction. It's very hard to do, but I guess maybe with meditation and all the other things, I can reach there one day.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love the first line because I think that's really the heart. In some ways, it is the heart of the poem. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs, that only that much of saying, okay, can you keep the perspective when everything
rational?
Yes, not just rational. It's rational, spiritual, emotional, basically kind of maintain the core while there is a lot of chaos going on where you can go ahead and go from there. Next up is going to be Donna. Donna, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I like what you've said already about it. And it is, I think, about reactivity. And my first reaction was stick to your own values. And as you meant, perspective, and don't try to be vengeful or give tit for tat. You did this, so I'm going to do that. It's once again, maintaining an even keel.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Next up is Kevin, Mary, Rupali, Joe, and Jyoti. Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Sanka. I love this poem, first of all. Then I just have a different point about the one is said, but you can't trust yourself when all men doubt you. So if like that case, I that person, I would think twice. If we connect the idea, yesterday we talked about the nothing. It's easily, change it to self-ego, self-confidence to self, kind nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Donna, I want to correct one thing. The credit for choosing this poem goes to Joe, not to me. Joe was the one who has championed this poem. And then Rupali has been the champion of that again. So they are the ones who are responsible to make sure that this meetup happens. And I'm so delighted. I mean, this is just
Yeah,
incredible.
thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Next up is going to be Mary.
Hi. Okay, so about this stanza in particular, I think this one is kind of cool in contrast to the final sentence, really, of saying like what the whole poem has led you to become. But with this first stanza, I think it kind of, especially the last line of the stanza where it says, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. And I think this first stanza kind of hints in a non-preachy way that you're not doing this to look good. You're not living these ways to perform or to be a good person and be like better than. And I think he just says that without saying that. And I think that's cool about this stanza.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Next up is going to be Rupali, Joe, and Jyoti. Rupali.
To me, in this stanza, the word that kind of is highlighted is courage. Is, have the courage to face whatever comes your way, and whether, and have a clear mind, like you said, perspective, right? Have a clear head to kind of go through whatever comes your way. So I think to me, that's what it means.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rupali. Next up is Joe, followed by Jyoti.
Yeah, I think the two key lines in here are on being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating. And that is really critical, because if you do give in to those desires, and that you will be tempted to, that you will become the very thing that you loathe the most. So it's an actual warning in order to not be like them. And if you think about it, there's a famous saying from Marcus Aurelius, the best revenge is to not be like your enemy, because you're going down to that level. That's how things in societies actually degenerate, and that you don't take the high road, and that people end up just wanting to get back at one another to a point where you see a disintegration. And this is something actually in studying the art of war, that this had actually come up. The importance of virtue and ethics in preventing war. So I think that there is also an element of courage and specifically justice that both exist in these lines. And those are profound guidances for life, because we've all been lied about. We've all had our reputations unjustly tacked. And so when you approach it from that perspective, then you realize that's okay. It's not only good for me to not go down to the level of the individuals that are, acting out, but it's also important for on a metaphysical level as well.
Wonderful. Joe, thank you so much for championing this poem. What I'm realizing is that firstly, discussing of poems, like deep poems like this, it's such a fantastic idea. And so I'm, firstly, I'm tremendously grateful that you chose to do this. Secondly, if you or Maritza or Rupali or people who really, really like poems, if there are other poems, please propose those poems, because I am just blown away by this conversation. Thank you. Next up is going to be Jyoti, Ankita, and Donna. Jyoti.
Okay, so the way I'm looking at is that every so often you go through times or circumstances when you need to hold on to your integrity because you will be blamed for certain things in life that you have no you have no responsibility for it, but you are blamed. And but you just have to trust yourself and just keep moving. That's basically what it is. Just keep moving, and you have patience. You can you can just not deal with the lies, and just go ahead and whatever your internal values are, you just retain them, and then you just ignore what is going on around you. That's what my take is.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is Ankita, followed by Donna. Ankita.
Yes, so for me, the last 4 lines are interesting because my takeaway from that is self-control. Because if you think about it, lies and hate, when someone is putting that on you, or if you're surrounded by people who are dealing with that, then there's this temptation to retaliate, right? So you want to deal with lies or you want to hate in return, but it takes a lot of self-control to not do it. It's not easy. And the last line, which says that, yet don't look too good, not talk too wise, is because you don't know any better. Like, it's taking a lot of self-control, it's taking a lot of work to not, get carried away. So if you didn't put in the work, you would get carried away. So it's not like you were born that way. So it's just for me, it's just like, yeah, it takes a lot of work and you've got to put in the work if you want to be a certain way. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Ankita. Next up is Donna, followed by Allison. Donna. Donna, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I just wanted to respond to your comment about poems and things. What I was thrilled about so often the things that this group talks about are so deep that I can hardly.
No, you don't say it's so deep like that. It says, you should say so deep.
So deep. But what I mean, they're intimidating,
Okay.
and I feel like, oh, geez, it's too hard. And so, but this, to me, this was a simple, easy, comprehensible poem. And yet look at the depth that we're getting out of it. And so I was just happy to see something that I could understand.
No, Donna, that's a great point. See, the thing is, like, the deepest ideas and actual reality are very deeply connected.
Yeah.
Okay. And what he's doing, and that is another thing about his particular way of expression. Right? I mean, he's from the kind of romantic school of art.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's doing is that he believes in concretizing deep concepts.
Yeah.
So he doesn't give you just concepts. He's actually showing you what it looks like. So this is like, imagine an expanded version of it is some of his larger works where you have characters, everything. So in those characters, you can see the deepest ideas. So on one level, it is simple. It is simply a story of the things happening to these characters. But on another level, it's all, you're seeing all the principles play out.
Mm-hmm.
We have talked about this in terms of kind of mythos and logos.
Mm-hmm.
So that what you call the so deep discussions are mythos, are basically logos, where we are trying to analyze concepts and see how they are put together. What this is, art is mythos. It is focused on doing the same thing, but it does it through concretization. And because it is concretized, it speaks to you at multiple levels together. Mm-hmm. There is a sound of it that you react to. There is an emotion in it that you react to. It touches your heart. Imagery, yeah, it is visual. So it engages the visual cortex. So it is like a fully embodied experience. going one step further, when somebody reads the poem, they are actually, it is being presented as it should be presented, because that entire being of a person speaking the poem, which means so much to them, the meaning of it expressed in the voice, in the emotions, and words riding on the top of that. So that is the power of oral culture. Another way of looking at it is digital versus analog. Most of the thought is digital, like written work is digital. This is, art is analog. It actually shows you the context around the concept.
And goes to your feelings as well, not just your intellect.
Exactly, exactly. So thank you for bringing that up. Beautiful, beautiful point. Next up is going to be Allison and Marco. Allison.
This is real short. I think the first stanza reminds me of Michelle Obama's quote when she said, "When they go low, we go high."
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Great point. Next up is Marco.
Yeah, for me, basically when there's like differing views in a, I guess for me, it means like sticking to your guns and sort of like trusting your intuition when like, you know, there's like someone, when the sense in the room is going towards the opposite of what you're feeling, and sort of like sticking to it and trusting yourself, and you know, not be tired by waiting. And yeah, and I guess the second part was kind of just yeah, not, if someone does something to you, it doesn't mean something you don't like, you don't have to do something you don't like back to them. And that's
Thank you, Marco. Thanks. So I'm just going to read it out one more time because I am always amazed by how much he manages to cover in each paragraph. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. So this is all about keeping your head. When things are going wrong and everybody else is all frazzled, all kind of reacting to that, can you keep your head? Can you keep your perspective? So that's one point. Second, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, so can you maintain that confidence of your own vision when everybody else is doubting you? And the second part, again, he just makes this beautiful, but make allowances for their doubting too. So you're trying to see things from their perspective too, of saying, why are they coming from? Not just dismissing them. So there is a profound focus on yourself. At the same time, there is a profound respect that is there for others throughout this poem. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, this is a point that Fahad brought up, beautiful point about the patience, or being lied to, then the next next two lines is something that I don't remember who, but they focused on this one, that I think it was Ankita, or being lied to, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating. Okay, now this is, I think, very profound, because what happens is that people get carried away. There is this loop that occurs between people, which is like a vicious cycle. One person gets things wrong, the other person gets, response to that with it, and it just spirals out of control. So this is a way of kind of stepping back from that loop. Don't feed that loop. And yet, don't look too good, nor talk too wise. Again, it's a question of kind of respecting others saying that no matter what you are, there is a lot of value in other people, and don't kind of separate yourself from your community, regardless of whether, if you think you got something right and everybody is wrong, still firstly, make allowances for their doubting too, and don't look too good, not talk too wide. So it's a very profound set of statements right here between individual and community. Next up is going to be Brian, Katie, and Lloyd. Brian.
I don't really have a lot of comment, because I think Shrikant just touched on the points that I was interested in. I would just, in my opinion, we haven't done the second poem yet, or the second stanza.
We will come to it very shortly.
So I'll just wait then.
Yeah, just hold off for the second one. We'll read it and then we'll go. You'll go first. Next up is going to be Katie, Lloyd, and Adam. Katie.
I have one small point. I think when you read it again, I heard the all men. Like that's something that would make you insane if you felt like everybody was doubting you, like put you in an insane asylum. So that brought it out for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Next up is going to be Lloyd and Adam. Lloyd.
Yeah, no, I liked a lot of what you said, Shrikant. It's fast, really right on point. The only line, I think the most enigmatic line of that to me is that last line of that first stanza. I'm not sure there aren't occasions when you don't want to look good to shine. Let's say you're on a job interview. I mean, you want to look dynamite. I mean, you're competing with a lot of people. So number one, you want to look good. I mean, you're going to dress the part. You're not going to show up slovenly. And second of all, you want to look as wise as you can about the job that you are interviewing for. You want to display, I researched this. I know all about this. I know about this industry. So I'm not sure that that's just one example. I'm not sure there aren't occasions in life where you don't want to look good, or you don't want to seem wise. I mean, if you're trying to attract a person on a date, I mean, you want to look good. If you're running for public office, you want to sound wise. I guess there's subtle ways of doing that, but I'm not sure there aren't occasions where you don't want to look good or you don't want to look wise. So
thank you.
I think that one has some caveats to it.
Sure. Thank you, Lloyd. The operative word there is to. It's saying not don't look good. It's not saying nor talk wise. It is saying yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. And I think that changes the meaning of the sentence is completely different. If you were to just say, and yet don't look good. He's not saying that. He's saying and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. Now, what does that mean? It means look too good means that you yourself are being kind of a narcissist, and you are saying that I'm going to ignore all the input I'm getting. I have it all, I am the best. I don't need to look at any more feedback from anybody, and I don't need to, that's what it is saying. And what you're saying is that you're also saying at the same time, what he's saying, don't put other people down just because you know something. So don't talk too wise. It's also saying that when you're talking, make sure that you are understood by people. Don't talk too wise in the sense. He's not saying don't talk wise. He's saying talk wise, but don't talk too wise. So what he's saying is that speak from the top of your hierarchy, you know, speak the best thing you can, but do it in a way which is accessible to people. In pursuit, this is all about saying, be as good as you can be. That is the, you know, keep your head. No, so all of it is about be as good as you can be. But in so doing, don't cut off feedback. That's first thing it is saying from other people. And second thing it is saying is don't put other people down, actually communicate with them, and don't just go in a bubble because you think that you are right and other people are wrong. So that's what I think this line means. Next up is going to be Adam and Joe. Adam.
Yeah, hello. And I'm a newcomer here, so if I can talk just about my general understanding of this poem.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So my focus of this poem is that we should have our own courage, we should have our own strength, and we should have our own free will, no matter how other people judge us, no matter how other people treat us, and no matter how successful we are, or how bad we are. Just be yourself, just accept yourself. And how we can get that, how can we reach that? I think the way is just like 道德经 has said, that you should not have any judgments. You should not have any definition about good and bad, so that you would not misled by those judgments, those definitions. So you will follow your heart, and you will accept yourself as the way you are. So that's
wonderful.
What.
Thank you, Adam. Really appreciate that. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I just want to link the idea of, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise, directly kind of relates to the fourth stanza, where he mentions, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch.
Yes.
Those two are absolutely like interlinked with one another.
Absolutely.
Because you would,
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah, you would absolutely lose your common touch if you were to be speak too wise, or or look too good. You would actually, that's something that would distance you from your own personal authenticity and everyone else. So I think that that's a critical point into the poem, because that is also about the idea of connecting with everyone.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
If you can, and both those lines, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch.
And humility is critical in that process. So
wonderful. Excellent point. Next up is going to be Jyoti, and then we're going to go to the second para. Jyoti.
Yeah, the way I understand is that be wise, but don't alienate yourself from the others.
Yes.
Don't, stay within the boundaries and make them feel you are one of them, and speak wisdom. And there's nothing wrong with that, but just there's a fine line. Don't cross that fine line.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. All right. Who would like to read paragraph number 2, second paragraph? Go ahead and type R. Adam, would you like to read the paragraph?
Yes, sure.
Go ahead.
If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Folks, if you'd like to comment on this, go ahead and type exclamation mark. First is Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Okay, first I'd like to say I encountered this poem in high school. I had it taped to my wall in college through my junior year. I've read it a lot. I've also been challenged on this poem a time or two because it was on my wall in college. You know how that can happen. Now I'm just trying to pull it up again here. I don't want to lose the words. So I just want to say, it seems to me that in some ways he's taking the easy cases here. I don't disagree with anything anyone has said. The sentiment is absolutely, pure and virtuous, all the terms that people have used, and I think it is an inspirational poem. I had it posted for years. But listen to this. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, then you'll be a man. That's what it comes out to. That's the easy case. The hard case is, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, confronted with the truth from others, and somehow accommodate or find some common truth, then you'll be a man too. So this is the easy case. And if you go back again, if you just take the first line, if you keep your head when all about you are losing yours and blaming it on you, that's the easy case. Here's the hard case. If you can keep your head when all about you are keeping their heads too and blaming it on you. So he's picked some pretty easy cases here. And I kind of agree with what Shrikant said, that's striving towards community and accord and all that. It's absolutely true. But if you read through this, I think there's a lot of easy cases and it doesn't really go to the hard cases.
Thank you, Brian. Excellent point. I had not thought of that. The range of what this poem covers is so stunning to me that I had not even thought about what is it that it does not cover. And that is the advantage, Brian, of reading it thousands of times and posting it on your wall for years. So thank you. Next up is going to be Maritza, James, and Donna. Maritza.
To me, this second stanza, more than any of the other ones, is the one about perseverance. It's kind of the idea of, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. To me, that's like, even when you're doing everything right, sometimes it's not going to go right. Or in fact, it possibly often won't. But you should still hold your truths and persevere and keep going. And it's like, watch all the things you gave your life to broken, and then stoop to build them with worn out tools. That to me is just, it really resonates with those moments in our lives that have tried to break us. And when we just suck it up, straighten our spine and move forward and keep going. And that's what I hear. I mean, I hear it actually throughout the entirety of this poem, which is why it resonates with me, but this stanza especially. And, in the very beginning, he talks about, don't get too big for your thoughts. Don't get your head too big. And then don't get too in your head with disappointment out of things not going how you thought. Just keep trying and keep moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is James. James, go ahead.
I want to thank you and Joseph for picking this poem. It is excellent. It speaks to everyone. In particular, I think it speaks to political leaders or people who aspire to be political leaders, especially that part about if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. So imagine if you're a political candidate, let's say Hillary Clinton, and you lose, then you're dealing with disaster. That's something that we all have to deal with. We're all going to find disasters in our lives, and we're all going to find triumphs. And it's good to take them in proportion and to look at things with perspective. I think his whole overall message is take perspective in your life. Look at the big picture. Don't get caught up with little things. There's not a line in this poem, in the entire poem, that's not excellent. I had a hard time coming up with, something to talk about because everything is excellent. And so I want to thank you again for picking this poem. There's not a line that's not golden. I look forward to future discussions like this. Thank you.
Wonderful. James, we do these discussions every day, so you're welcome anytime.
All right, I'll come. I'm missing one on Rousseau right now with the History of Philosophy group. I chose this one because I like the poem If. I'll come back.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Devesh, Becky, and Joe. Devesh.
Yeah, thank you. I think it might have been touched upon by a previous share here, and it was a thing about in the second paragraph, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim. And it was said, do not live in the head. And because I can go into a lot of intellect defensiveness and intellect space and thinking, overthinking, whatever. But this is saying it's all very well, but your presence, your being, your actions based from that is possibly more valid, important, and enlightening rather than just a thinking residing between my 2 ears. And the third line is, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. It's an old concept which is bringing up again to be looked at, equanimity. And I think that might be where my understanding comes here. I don't know too much about if you can bear to hear the truth you have spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. But I've had many experiences in my family situations where what you say and what the understanding and then told to everyone else is a totally distorted and a deranged version of what I might have meant or intended. So, and I can do the same also. Now here comes the call for me not to become the knave who twists us around. And the fourth thing, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. I'm just putting it down. I mean, there are a million things. As you said, the earlier speaker, that everything speaks. It calls out for a more nobler being. And here it's asking for perseverance with right effort, with even if the tools or whatever I use in my faculties and capabilities are worn out. I can either read it as stoop and build them up, as in like a weary, tired, or I can say that with gusto, and what will it take with enthusiasm to carry on, trudge the road of chop wood and carry water. Thanks.
Thank you, Devesh. Next up is Becky, Donna, and Joe. Becky.
So the piece that I really see from this stanza is the idea of dying and rebirth. And here you go through hardships of life, you're broken, but you rebuild them. And to me, the worn out tools actually signifies that you've done this before. You've rebuilt and you're using the tools over and over. It's not the first time and it won't be the last. And it's this repetitive rebirth that that I see throughout the stanza, where your end doesn't come when you have your success, and your end doesn't come when you have your failure. You keep going, and at your failure, you rebuild. At your success, you move on to something else. But despite success or failure, you always have that courage to keep dreaming and not giving up.
Wonderful. Excellent point about being reborn continuously. That's the heart of it. Thank you. Next up is going to be Donna, followed by Joe. Donna.
I just wanted to comment on the triumph and disaster idea. At first, it somewhat puzzled me. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, I thought, imposters. And then I realized it goes back to the old idea. Everything is a matter of attitude. You know, it's not what happens to you, it's how you regard what happens to you. So it won't be a triumph, or I mean, it won't be a disaster if you don't think it is. And it's just as well if you don't get too carried away with triumph. So it's everything is a matter of attitude.
Wonderful. Excellent point. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I mean, that is my favorite line in the poem, is that if you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same, because either way, you're allowing yourself to get too high or too low. And in each case, it prevents you from achieving what your ultimate goal is. So either one of those will inhibit you, cause you to be either complacent, or may cause you to may result in despair. So I think that's my favorite line in the entire poem. Or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. This too also speaks to our emotional state in this kind of a situation, is where we don't necessarily, if you don't allow yourself to get too high or too low, that you're able to then execute and rebuild, even though you've been through quite a bit. So I think that this is one of the most powerful stanzas in the poem. I do want to say thank you to Brian really quickly for bringing up, because during the meetup that I led on this, as I said, what's not in this poem? What is this poem missing? And people had a hard time coming up with something, but he really came up with something. And it's important to look at, that what was maybe potentially you can add, or what was missed, or what what else could be, what may be the negatives side of this poem. One of the really quickly things that I think Lloyd was making, or you don't want to be unwise or things like that. That's how you essentially decide something's good in Stoicism. The opposite is actually, it's always a good. It's not necessarily, so wisdom is always a good. And you're mentioning, when don't you want to be wise? So that's how actually there's a principle that's associated with certain stanzas. Anyway, I'll stop talking. So
wonderful. Thank you, Joe. You can talk for a long time, because you're making a lot of sense. Thank you. Next up is going to be Mark Ziz, followed by Lloyd. Mark.
So I just wanted to say, I also had this printed out, and I framed it, and I never have done that with any other poem. And I had forgotten about it for a long time, and having seen the details of this meetup, I brought it out. And it is something that's deeply moving, and it speaks to so many things that we aspire to, and many things that we can't, like things that we want to, but it's beyond our reach, it feels, but things that we should try to aspire to. This particular paragraph I find like the most meaningful, and I know a lot of people have said the same, but I kind of think it speaks more than the others to courage. From the very first line of how to begin, how to live your life, like what to guide you on your journey of life, to the very end, when this paragraph, when it says, if everything is broken, like everything that you strive for in that arc is broken, you're older and you don't have the energy necessarily to try to rebuild it again with these, when with the tools that are worn out, is obviously for me is age and not having the vim and vigor of youth that you would have had when you dreamed those dreams to begin with. So I think it's such a great beginning of the paragraph. It's such a great end to close it. It's very good bookends. And in between are the things that are scary, horrible things. Whether it be triumph and disaster, and knowing that they're just phases that you can go through. Whether it be hearing your words change to mean other things, which is your words are things that are close to your heart. And by hearing these things that are birthed of your mind being used in a horrible way, it's one of the torturous things that can happen to you. But to be able to put it aside and start again is just such a powerful statement. It's such a inspiring thing that you could just do that. And I don't know that a lot of people have the courage to do that. I'd like to believe that by reading this, you're faced with that decision to make.
Mark, you, like Brian, who has also kind of put the poem up, I think you guys are able to make more points about it that other people have not thought of. Like, for example, I was looking through this paragraph, right? And for me, I'm seeing 4 very distinct points. Those kind of stood, and you were able to kind of connect them up. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to read it and see what I got from each of, each. So it's like 2 pairs of lines. So the first pair is, if you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim. This is to kind of accept the complexity of us. We can dream, but dreams have a place. And if it goes beyond that, it's not good. Similarly, think. It's good to think, but that has a role in the whole scheme of things. And if you miss that, then that's not good. So it's kind of saying that you have these many facets, but keep them in their place. So that's the first. The second 2 lines, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 impostors just the same. I really like the word impostors, because impostors, what does imposter mean? It's something that is pretending to be something else. So in what sense are triumph and disaster impostors?
Oh, sorry.
The reason they are no, go ahead, Mark.
I don't want to interrupt your explanation.
Let me go ahead and state it, and then you can comment on it. See, the way in which I see them as imposters, because the way in which it operates is that when people are triumphant, they say, I am good. They replace the situation, the current success, with that they are good. They become complacent. They take credit for a whole bunch of things which are actually not their own. And they have a false idea of who they are and what the situation is. Identical same thing happens with disaster. How is disaster imposter? Because in disaster, it is pretending that everything is gone. You are bad, you're incapable, and you are all down. So you are letting your identity be replaced by a state of success or failure. And you're losing yourself in those imposters. So those triumph or disaster are pretending to be the core you, but that's not the core you. That is just external situations. So in that sense, they are imposters. The next pair talks about, if you can bear to hear the truths you have spoken, twisted by knaves, to make trap for fools. I look at it in a slightly expanded way. You create things. Okay, could be your products. Words are just one of your products. You create things. No matter how much you put your heart and soul in it, no matter how well you design it, it can be used for purposes which by people to do all kinds of bad things. And that's something that is not within your control. So that makes a clear distinction about your creation. Now, in this case, he's a poet, so words are his means of doing that. But this applies to everything that we do. What happens to the products that we create? We are letting the products out into the world. What people will do with it, it's not under our control. We can control the products, but not what people do with it. And the last one is the point that Becky brought up about rebirth. Or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. I have to say, I love the visual, word, for example, stoop, right? It captures in visual terms that, okay, I am down now and I have to pick this up and I will rebuild. So the idea that is what you have to do. That is what you have to be prepared to do all the time. So I saw these as four different things. Mark, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. You were saying something about.
Oh, no, you didn't interrupt me. I almost interrupted you. But that's what's so wonderful about this particular piece of work is that there's just so much in there to mine. I don't know if he meant it one way or he had the multi-layers or I don't know if what the intention was, but it certainly is something that can be looked at so many different ways. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because he did such a wonderful job, but I just could say an opposite or not opposite, but different interpretation of the first two lines where, I lost, there it is. Not the first two lines, but and treat those two impostors just the same, triumph and disaster. I love the way that you broke it down by saying, you're taking credit versus you're kind of blaming yourself for something that was just circumstances, that conspired against you. And those are the imposters. But I think you can also look at it as like, do these things really even exist at all, or is it just your way of looking at it at the time? There's like this proverb, and I'm trying to find it on the internet. Well, I try to do it really quickly, and it goes to the fact that it's a Chinese proverb, supposedly, that a farmer lost his son, and a farmer got drafted. I'm sure everybody probably knows this. Where was it a good thing or is it a bad thing? I don't know. And you keep on looking at it, and every time somebody tells him how either lucky he was or how his fate was so poor, he says, "Well, it's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know." And I think that imposters can kind of cover that situation as well, where it depends on how you look at any situation. But the calling of imposters is capturing the fact that it's really in the eye of the beholder of how you look at any given situation.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Donna and Joe we're making exactly the same point, that it's the evaluation distinct from what is actually going on. So excellent point. Next up is Lloyd. Lloyd, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add maybe a different point of view here. Last night, I read a little biographical information about Rudyard Kipling, just to get a sense of the poet himself. Again, it's a small sample size, not any great revelation of him, but I do think that those last two lines, I do get a sense that there's some autobiographical situation relating to that. And I think maybe part of that about the twisting the words may not just be his art, but one thing about Rudyard Kipling is he was very nationalistic and militaristic. And he wrote poems exhorting young men to joined the services to fight in World War I. He was very pro World War I. His son died in World War I. And they clearly state in the biography, he exhorted young men, join the service, go into war. And I have a feeling that he might have suffered some backlash about that strong exhortation of going to war. I could see that being twisted, you know, by people, twisted by knaves. I could see those kind of words being then spoken back to him. Remember when you exhorted everybody to go to war? Well, we lost 600,000 or, you know, however many soldiers. So those words, I think, might have really come back to haunt him. And that could be some of what the twisting of his words by knaves. I'm not sure the traps of fools, but his poem was very pro fighting World War I, his poetry.
Thank you, Lloyd, for that historical things. The Rudyard Kipling had a very rich life. He engaged life. He lived, he lived a lot of it in, quite a bit of it in India. And India during that time was like the Wild West. And it was a place of adventure. There's all kinds of things going on. So there is a tremendous amount of experience connected to what is, you know, what he's saying. Everything that he's saying is based on tremendous amount of experience, not just this one item, but the entire, like the scope of his experience. So it's much larger than this point. Next up is going to be paragraph number 3. Who would like to read it? All right, anybody? Let's see. I'm going to have Evanik.
Okay. If you can make, wait, sorry, just lost my place. Oh, sorry. Okay. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on where there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanik. If anybody wants to comment, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Okay, Maritza, go ahead.
This section again, to me, it's a continuing theme, perseverance. And it's this one points out the grace that can be found in persevering. Like, do it with grace. Don't do it like grudgingly. Kind of like hold your hair up, kind of your head up, kind of thing. You know, the whole concept of you know, start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. It's kind of one of those things where, you know, I get to get paid a high compliment. Somebody look at you and go, I don't see that ugly history in your comportment. That's like, yes, thank you. And I feel like that's what he's saying. Live your life such that who you are speaks more loudly than the sorrows you've survived.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. Next up is going to be James.
Yeah, this is another example of perseverance. The idea is if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on with nothing there when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. How many times in our lives have we been in a situation where we needed to persevere and pursue, and we didn't think we had it in us? This is a real motivating statement he's making, that if you're really committed to something, you have to give it your all. I find this to be a very inspiring stanza, and I'm glad it's there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, James. Next up is going to be Joe Evanique. Joe and Evanique. Joe.
Yeah, I think that the first part about this, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, that particular one, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word of your loss. A lot of the things that we think about here is that, or we have spoken about here, is how you perceive failure. And if we're ruminating over our failures and not seeing it for what it is, just a random occurrence, then that prevents us from actually moving forward. So it can actually become detrimental in our ability to move forward. The second part of that is if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. That I look at it is that if you want to do something great, it has to come from within, and it has to come from the will. It has to come from your very being, and it has to come from your personal will in order to really achieve something. So I see this in addition to, it's a very nice complement to not live in the past and ruminate over what you've had to deal with, and then also call upon the will that you need in order to succeed, to move forward. So
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Evanique, followed by Mark. Evanique.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to do is, I think to me, the key to this third stanza is part of the first, where it says, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you. And this third stanza is all about trusting yourself when you have the loss, when you heap all your winnings and then risk it on one turn of a pitch and toss, and you trust yourself and it doesn't go the way you want it to go. And everything just goes away. And then you have to force it, you have to force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve you long after they're gone. It's like you trusted yourself, you bet on yourself, and you lost. And it goes to the failure, but it's not really a failure. It's just rebuilding, like Becky was saying about using those worn out tools in that second stance. I think it comes into play as well, because when you lose and you bet everything, you bet your heart on it and it just didn't go that way, you just feel like nothing. And then to come back and say, well, I'm going to stand here, I'm going to do it again, I'm going to trust again, I'm going to trust in myself again, I'm going to trust in other people again. That's forcing your heart to do what your will wants it to do, because you want to be able to be resilient and move on after you've been knocked down. But that is just brute force at that point. There is nothing else that is inspiring you. There's no motivation there. That's where you have to call on your heart to come on, we can do this. And that's going back to actually trusting yourself and knowing that no matter what happens, you can still do this. You're still breathing. So you got this. Like if you're still waking up and you're breathing, you've already won half that battle. So that's what it just says to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Mark.
See, I think that in this stanza, what speaks to me is a lot of inspiring others. I mean, a lot of the other stuff that we've talked about so far has been like, how it's kind of like Hemingway-esque almost in a certain way. And the world and the time frame that, it was around was maybe that machismo was part of, being a man as the at the very end, he asserts. And obviously, man being a human being is contemporary times. They didn't have gender based. But anyway, the point I'm making is that this, at first, it's very scary. If you read it one way, if you say, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on the turn of pitch and toss, at first it seems like he's saying maybe you should just always be fully committed to everything. But I don't, that's what I thought at first. But I think that the next sentence really kind of speaks to that more. So if you can do all that and you lose and start again at your beginnings, it's more for showing others, like you lived a certain way, you committed to things. And if you lost it all, you can hold your head up by not talking about all the things that you lost. And even after, you lose like your heart, your nerve, your sinew, they're gone. It's saying at the end, hold on. You have the will to tell others, hold on, to inspire other people that even though you've lived a certain way and it didn't work out, you need to continue to go on and let others also be inspired to commit to things. That's the way I look at it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Katie.
I like the lottery metaphor there. I mean, he could have chosen a different metaphor, like, you get your house getting burnt down or something like that. This is kind of more like the lottery, like life can kind of throw lotteries at people. Yeah, that was it. And I'm forgetting my second point.
Thank you. Maritza, go ahead.
Just really quickly, I just want to comment on the very last line of the stanza where, he's talking about the will, and it's a capital will, the will which says to them, hold on. And it's, this is the first time I've read this poem countless times, but something Mark said just made me realize it actually says, which says to them. I've always viewed these last two lines as, it says, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will, which says to them, hold on. And I've always viewed it as just you speaking to yourself, telling yourself to hold on. But now I'm going to have to chew on Mark's perspective. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Maritza. So I'm going to read this. I see this as 2 points, the first 4 lines and the last 4 lines. The first one is saying, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. My interpretation of this has changed over time. The thing that always puzzled me is never breathe a word about your loss. And firstly, I don't think, initially I thought that it is saying that you should take risks. But the more I think about it, I think what he's trying to point to is that everything that you have, this is very much of a stoicism point. Everything that you have, most of it you can lose. So the fact, when you read Marcus Aurelius, they will hit you on the head with the fact you think you have health, you can lose it. You think you have family, you can lose it. If you think you have wealth, you can lose it. It's that kind of a point of saying that everything that you have achieved, you could lose. And start again at your beginning and never breathe a word about your loss. Okay. What is this never breathe a word about your loss? I think it means that there is a place in you which remains untouched, no matter what happens to you. There is a beautiful line in the book Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, where the hero says that a pain that goes only up to a point. So there is something in you that remains untouched by whatever pain, whatever disasters that happen to you. And when that point is maintained, then in a very deep sense, the pain doesn't matter, because you can begin again. You have that point from which to act. And never breathe a word about your loss. That is seeing that there, you see no reflection of your loss in you when you're operating, because your soul, the core of your being, still remains untouched no matter what happens. That's what it is trying, I think that's what it is trying to get to. So I will just focus on those ones. I mean, that's, to me, is a very, very deep point that is being made. And I do think that the accept the will, which says to them, refers to your heart, nerve, and sinew. They're saying if you can force your heart, nerve, and sinew to serve you, he's now talking about your heart, nerve, and sinew, to serve you long after, you serve your turn long after they are gone. And so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will, which says to them, it says to your heart, says to your nerve, says to your sinew, hold on. So there is something in you, that will, that is supporting your heart, your nerve, your sinew, long after they are completely exhausted in their energy. And there is nothing that is holding them together. It is you're counting, you're going back to your core of your being, your will, to do that. Next up is stanza number 4. Who would like to read it? Okay, let's go with Mark. Mark, go ahead.
If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Joe, would you like to start by commenting on it?
Yeah, I think that this is almost a line. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. I immediately, and it's not a direct one-to-one correlation with this, but I did immediately think of Epictetus, of, nothing can hurt you if, and he goes through a whole list of items that if you live, if you're, what's in your control, what's outside of your control, and your friends are, and your foes and their actions are outside of your control. So that's something that really kind of hit home with me personally when I thought about this. When you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. That is important because the idea of wasting time, it's a precious, it's precious that we have to make the most of our time. And that is something that is, I think that that's critical to living every moment. And it's impossible to live every single moment, to its fullest, but it's a reminder. If you're reviewing yourself at the end of the day and you're writing, this is a reminder that what did I do, or when did I waste time? When did I not waste time? And it also speaks to me in the present moment. You're staying in the present moment if you feel the unforgiving minute, because that minute sometimes you feel like is never going to end, or that period of time in your life that is never going to end, that you're actually, you're staying present in the moment and you're doing whatever is in your control and what is not in your control. But my favorite line is by far, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch. You understand the needs of society as well as you understand the needs of, or the way the noble class, so to speak, functions. And it's an understanding that everybody is an individual and has their own story. So that's kind of critical and kind of in communicating and connecting with people, because you can appreciate where everybody's coming from and you're not discounting anybody in the process. So I think that that's really, and that's the basis of authenticity as well, I think as well. So those are just my immediate comments. And yeah, the final line is just the earth and everything is in it. So I think that is just speaking to the idea that you've achieved a certain degree of eudaimonia. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Maritza, followed by Katie. Maritza.
In the first 4 lines here, what I hear is an admonition for us to remain true to ourselves, despite or regardless of people or circumstances around you. I like the idea of, talk with crowds and keep your virtue, because, it's very easy to have very front in your mind those things you hold near and dear. And, these are the things that are most important to me when it's just yourself. But when you're out in the crowds, sometimes we get swayed with groupthink. And what I'm hearing in these stanzas here is that if you can do this, you are working towards a good path here. So, or more likely, if you're reading between the words here, because I view this poem as kind of a motivational, if you can do this, you're going to you're on the right trail here. And this is what I'm hearing here. He's telling us to hold, I'm going to steal your word, Shrikant, and hold your core tightly around you like a shroud, even as people around you jostle and, come close and rub against you. Don't let them allow you to forget those things which you know to be your very true self. That's what I hear us being reminded to ensure we do as we walk through life in the first couple stanzas. And even actually this entire last stanza, even, if all men count with you, but none too much, again, because you don't want to be a glory hog, because that is going to make you forget who you are. If your head gets overinflated, you want to be considered a trustworthy person, but not, the only person in the room. And the unforgiven minute. With this one, it depends, honestly, it really depends on the day in which I read this poem, how I view this stanza here, because sometimes I really think if you're following so many of the ifs that came before, by the time you get to this one, you realize that you don't really have unforgiven minutes. Because if you're in that forward moving path, that is your meaningful path, none of them can possibly be unforgiven, because you're zigging and zagging your way through them so that they're all doable. You can get through any of them. So I'm not sure how I reconcile that one quite much. And that yours is the earth and everything that's in it. I think the world is ours for the taking. We shape it and mold it to how we see fit. And the only way to do that is through listening to all the ifs that came before. And again, I'm stealing Shrikant's word because I really do like it. Holding tightly to our core self, and then just, forward movement. Thank you. I've really, really enjoyed this.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marisa. Next up is Katie, followed by Evanique. Katie.
Yeah, I think this one kind of circles back to some of the earlier themes, like if all men count with you, but none too much, like what you were saying earlier, that you don't just, write people off. You have to accept feedback, even people with all their flaws. Also, none too much, like some power over you. You're not holding on to that anger for much longer. You're just not holding on to the anger. I think yours is the earth and everything that's in it. Interesting that someone read into that like a colonial theme. I kind of read in a biblical theme into it, like the meek shall inherit. And I'm not sure, like that was kind of, and then you'll be a man. I like Donna's like a mensch thing, like person. So that's what I was that's where my intuition went when the first time I read it.
Thank you, Katie. Next up is Evanique.
Yeah, I was reading the same thing that Katie was reading. If all men count with you, but none too much. I thought of that, and I thought of that as like, if all men are equal to you, or if all men are like on the same playing field as you, and that there's not one value, no more value than in one man than another, then, but none too much. That means you're not really looking up to someone, but you're not also looking down on someone. That they're kind of on the equal playing field, but none too much means that, yeah, men can say things about you, and you can take that as either as value or as something that can be disregarded without disregarding the person. Like, I always think of the advice, like when people give advice to other people, some people may take it and be like, I can take that advice, and I think that's great advice. But then you can also decide for yourself that that is not the wisest or the sagest advice, or maybe that person is not speaking to your particular situation, and you could just like make it even. So I thought of that line, and I was like, I think you just have to, I think it counts to the trusting yourself again, and also being able to humble yourself enough to listen to this person and see if that their advice fits your life.
Thank you, Evanique. I'm going to go through this. This is the kind of writing when I read, I feel I don't know how to speak or how language works, because I'm just awed by how much he's able to do with words. I have no idea how he does it, but he does it. And I cannot do this. I cannot do anything compared to what he does. So this is to me is like the culmination of how much power can be packed into so few words. If you can talk with the crowds. And every time I'm even talking about this, I'm realizing that I'm getting like one level of meaning. I'm getting one line. He's actually showing you 5, 6 lines together running through things. And they are actually integrating with several other things that he has said. And all of that is going on at the same time. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue. So this is the point about community, that you can talk with everybody, yet maintain the independence. So it is having the I and the other at the same time. So respecting your I and respecting the other at the same time. Or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. So you can walk with kings. So you can rise up in any ability to any level, but at the same time be able to interact with anybody. So again, it is saying that rise high, at the same time be able to go broad at all times. And again, just the words that he's using, walk with kings, the concretized way, or lose common touch. Okay, touch. I mean, it's just so much built in here. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you. Now look at how much, like, foes nor loving friends. Now, usually it is thought of as two completely different, completely opposite things. And he's saying, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, so there is a core of you. It is the same point about interacting with people, at the same time maintaining your core. It is the same point as triumph and disaster. It's distinguishing between the external and internal. So if you can maintain the internal, regardless of triumph and disaster, regardless of foes or loving friends, because loving friends, they will have their own nature, and it's very easy to kind of go in a direction different from your core. With friends, sometimes even more easily than foes. So he's trying to capture all of that by simply saying, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you. Okay, I mean, this is so much. If all men count with you, but none too much. Again, what does this mean? So all men count with you. So this is the point about respecting the core, this soul in every person, but none too much. What does that mean? That no matter how much you admire a particular person, it should not lead to disdain for others. I'm not capturing it well. The none too much has two parts. One, it is in relationship to other people, like this person that you like compared to other people, but more importantly, it is relationship with yourself. You can, what does it mean to have none too much? What is too much? It is the same point of being too wise. Liking other person should not destroy your own individuality. So it cannot be up to a point where you lose that individuality. So it is continuously saying it is I and others, not I or others. If that other is amazing, can't lose your I. So that is none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. This line has always stunned me because it seemed very different from others. This is now, he's saying, look, all of this stuff that I'm talking is not an abstract thing. You got a minute. What are you going to do? He brings it down in this very simple, say, unforgiving minute. Okay, what is unforgiving minute? That your life counts. Every minute of your life counts. It is sacred. It's not something. And it is unforgiving minute. It's a minute that is lost. What are you going to do with it? Everything that you said about everything else, ultimately it comes down to this 1 minute that you have now. Are you going to do this, all of this stuff? Not that you will dream of doing it someday. It's the unforgiving minute that you're living every day. It's the concept of moment. Ultimately, everything, all these thoughts, all these great thoughts, the only place where it is actually where the rubber hits the road, it is the present. What are you going to do? This unforgiving minute. With 60 seconds worth of distance. Again, look at how he does it. 60 seconds worth, okay? Look at how beautiful it has 60 seconds. Otherwise you think, oh, it's just a minute. No. It has 60 seconds. You can count them and you have to make them count. That's what he's saying, okay? Yours is the earth and everything that's in it. So far, he's been saying, look, be prepared to lose everything. And now suddenly he's saying, yours is the earth and everything in it. What is that? He keeps on telling you throughout this poem that really you can't count on anything. And now he's saying, it's all yours. What is that? And then he's saying, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Both those are intimately connected. He's actually, this is one way to describe it would be in terms of Tao Te Ching. That's the best formulation that we have talked about of this principle. He's saying, so when he has complained about the success being an imposter, success or defeat being an imposter, why, in what sense does he mean that yours is the earth and everything in it? I think it is the same idea as Lao Tzu, as Tao Te Ching. Nature is what it is. And if this is saying yes to nature, accepting it fully for what it is, and it is yours in the sense, this is the deep idea of Indian philosophy, where it says there is Brahma, which is the nature, and there is your soul. And the principle is Tat Tvamasi. So once you say yes to reality, and you begin to act in accordance with it, at once you will be a man, so you will be a human being. That's what it means to be a human being. And the earth is yours, because you're saying yes to reality and yes to your own soul at the same time. All these other things, success, failure, these are all names. These are all temporary conditions of nature that you go through. That's what Lao Tzu would say. The Indian philosophy would say that is Maya. These are all temporary things that are going through your emotions, even your thoughts, things that you make, people around you, all of these keep changing. This is not anything that can be named is not the eternal Tao. That's not nature. You get nature and the I at the same time when you operate at this metaphysical level. I think that's what he's trying to say. And I mean, I'm just so ashamed. I mean, he says all of this in such simple ways. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Mark.
So I just wanted to say, I mean, it's always great to hear those words read. It's just amazing. But you know, when you were talking before about the minute versus the 60 seconds, you know, it's so hard to figure out exactly what the word unforgiving means in that sentence. And I had a couple of interpretations. I mean, one is similar to what you were saying, is like there's so much you can do in a minute. A minute can just be, well, it can be a long time sitting on a couch, you know, just waiting and for a minute to go by. When you put a hit song up in the microwave and it's a minute, you're waiting, and that minute is a long time. And it's you've done nothing but sit there and wait for that minute, and you're counting it down. If you can not waste that minute like that, and you instead can accomplish a lot in each one of those seconds, that's something you're making use of your time, and that's amazing. Another interpretation that I had was, and I don't know, I mean, it speaks differently to the way you're thinking about it at the time, but unforgiving being the time where you don't forgive someone else. You're holding a grudge for somebody for a minute versus actually moving forward with things in your life, you know, making progress in your relationships or whatever it is that is holding you back from not forgiving someone. You know, that's also an interesting interpretation. I don't know which one I would go with because there's so many ways to read this, but it's amazing either way.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. All right, folks, any final thoughts on the poem? Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to make comments. It's going to be Joe. Joe, you need to unmute.
I just want to say thank you for covering this poem. I mean, it's one of my favorites. I think that it's filled with so much wisdom and that people can take so much from it. And you really have we've captured so many great ideas here this evening. The one thing that I do want to, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings and nor lose the common touch. There was one thing I'd forgotten to say about that important thing is that the idea of how you connect with everybody and that everybody has problems is a really critical point in that particular instance. People tend to think that people that are of nobility don't have issues, or that people's issues have to be very evident to them. Life is suffering. And the more we understand that, and we don't necessarily assign a status to suffering, the more we can actually connect with people. And I'm not discounting that, saying some suffering isn't worse than others, but it's not a contest either. So it's really important to note that as well as one of the. but I thought it's a fantastic poem. It's something that has allowed me to journal much more efficiently. And I thank you 1,000 times for allowing me to bring this to 52 Living Ideas and share it with everybody, because there were so many great insights. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, I thank you for recommending it. And the idea of doing poems, I think, is fantastic. And I look forward to doing more of them. So I want to close by talking about what we are going to do on Mondays. Actually, this is a project that I'm extremely thrilled about. Go ahead. Joe.
Lloyd.
No, I'm going to go into the next one.
Okay.
I want to end on a high note.
Okay.
This is good. I'm aware. So the point is that I did an interview with CJ. Okay, I have just enormous respect for CJ, and I did an interview with him on his book and all the meetups that he's been doing. And the thing that remained with me was that he held up this book, Design Way, 4 times during the interview. So I said, what is this? Because I have so much respect for him, and I had always thought of him as that Buckminster Fuller is the core of his ideas. But clearly, I could see that this book was important. So, okay, so I got the book and started reading it, and this is like, it's been 3 days, and I'm rushing through it. I'm about 75% of the way through. It is a profound concept. What I was trying to do with Mondays was that we're looking at the East and the West. Okay, we're systematically trying to capture what East brings and what West brings. I think we're doing a fantastic job with Tao Te Ching. Meetups on Tuesdays are just incredible. Okay, East has certain strengths and West has certain strengths. Charlie put it very beautifully. West is extroverted, focused primarily on the outside world, uses language, and is transforming. It's all about dominating and transforming nature. East is Yang. East is Yin. It is all about accepting nature, using intuition rather than language, and more inner focused. You need both of them. So we are doing that, the inner part, the Yin part, the intuitive part, the metaphysical part, with metaphysical in the sense the consciousness part of how we relate to nature as such, with Tao Te Ching. So the question was, my idea was to do a whole series of Western works, but I found something stunning, that this folks' idea, Harold Nelson's idea of design, actually captures the essence of the West. It's a profound idea. If you just understand this idea, it's a very, very deep idea. What is design? Design is you understanding, taking everything from your senses, organizing it, figuring out where you need to go, what you need to be doing in order to live, and designing and implementing that using all the data of the senses, all the inductive ability, and actually transforming life. All of this process, and doing that as a continual basis. The way I summarize it, man is a designing animal. Designing is a better distinguishing characteristic to separate man than rational, because rational doesn't capture a whole bunch of things about us, that we are intuitive, that we transform our world, our environment as a way of living. design capture, we are future oriented. These are all the points that we learned from Jacob Bronowski in The Ascent of Man. All of those are captured in the concept of design, as Harold Nelson puts it. Okay, design, again, Roger, when he talks about Jordan Peterson's idea, he said, empty the word of the meaning that you held and actually let's try to put it together. You have to do the same thing with the concept of design. His concept, Harold Nelson's concept of design, is this concept. And that entire book is about what design is, how you can be a designer. It doesn't matter what area, whether you're speaking a sentence, whether you're interacting with a person, whether you're building software, everything is design. The way he puts it is that when fish talk to each other, they say, what is water? Because they are in water, they can't. We live in design. That is what culture, people generally call culture. That's all design. And that is what this book is about. Now, we have some tremendous assets. So it is the most ambitious project that we have ever done, okay? The scale of it. At the same time, we have some real strong assets. Firstly, a lot of the themes that we have talked about, like the intuitive and rational that we talked about in Carl Jung, he holds. The yin and yang dance, that's what he talks about. Order and chaos, he talks about that too. The distinction between oral and written and how do you use both of those, kind of fully embodied oral presentation and written digital, he incorporates that. So he's actually building on many OODA loops of this continuous design. You keep designing things, you test it, and you keep on modifying it. He has that. So it brings together many of the ideas that we have studied, focusing on the core idea of the West. So if you want to really understand Western civilization and its unique strengths as compared to East, this is a great thing. So I'm going to start this series on Mondays, starting next Monday, on the design way. I'm going to start, again, it's a very large project. I want people, regardless of their level of knowledge, regardless of how much they choose to put in it, to benefit from it. So each meetup is going to be accessible to any newcomer. At the same time, each meetup is going to be extremely valuable for somebody who has been studying it for many years. That's my standard all the time for all the meetups. You can see for here, there were people who were very, very familiar with the poem. Some people had just read it. And I think everybody got something from, something deep from it. It so happens that it's very simple equation. The more you put in, the more you get. So if you actually choose to read the book, think about it, you will get 10 times or 100 times the value of anybody who's just doing it more lightly. So, and I'm looking, so we're going to do many things. So the other big asset that we have is CJ. Okay, CJ has done for Thinking Society, I think 20 to 25 meetups. And all of those he's done a lot of writing for, all of that is available. Maritza has, shared with me one amazing website, which captures the core concepts of this. There is a short video of 30 minutes of Harold Nelson talking about the core of the idea. We're going to start very slowly. Next Monday, we're going to be just talking about that 30-minute video and what is design. Get that concept right. Then I'm working with Maritza to identify the core concepts. And I'm hoping that Joe also would join us to talk about, identify the core concepts across the book. And I'm going to identify, I don't think there are more than 20. It's probably closer to maybe 10 concepts that you really need to understand. CJ warned me that he found it very difficult to communicate the ideas. I found the book to be very easy to read because I think I already have the pieces, and I think people in this meetup have the pieces. The reason most people find it difficult, it is about integration of reason and emotion and how the dance plays. You have to see that yin yang are natural elements that go between each other, and you don't see contradictions between them, but complementarity. They are contraries, but not contradictories, being able to go between them. If you can do that, if you can do with fixedness of design and need for it to be updated continuously, depending on changing functions. This is Louis Sullivan. The other part is the person who has had greatest impact on me is Louis Sullivan. He's also an architect. And I was telling Maritza, basically, Louis Sullivan and Harold Nelson are basically talking about the same thing. Terminology is different. Louis Sullivan is far more beautiful, far more poetic at doing that. This guy is far more systematic at doing that, but both are aiming at the same thing. So they actually complement each other. So that is going to be the biggest integration that we see. And if we actually succeed in doing that, the beauty of the design way will be magnified maybe fivefold, and the rigorousness underlying rigorous presentation of Louis Sullivan's ideas can be improved at least twice or maybe even 5 times. Okay, so that connection is what I'm hoping to achieve. So it's a very ambitious project, but I want to do it again. We are designing that. We are designing this way of approaching such a ambitious goal in a community. That's what we are trying to do, because I have found that I will learn the most the more people are engaged in this pursuit. So I'm inviting all of you to come, especially I'm going to reach out to people who are in the Thinking Society, because CJ has been talking about these meetups for all this time. So we'll get some of these people who have been studying it for at least 4 or 5 years. And I'm going to keep reaching out to people, and I encourage any kind of collaboration. So please, write to me, but through Meetup, through email, whatever you want, and let's see what we can do together. Currently, I've just planned simple things. First, we are going to, because I always like to do soft launches, because I want to get more people excited about it. I want more people to acquire the book and start reading it. I'm going to come up with I've discussed this with CJ, and we have come up with a reading plan, which is not the order of the book. It is very difficult to read it in that order. There is a reading plan, which is going to be much more easier way of reading the book by jumping through its parts in a different order than they are presented, because his purpose, his audience was mostly designers and academics, whereas this is a general audience. There is a different way of doing that. In addition to that, we are going to keep summarizing it, just like we did for Bucky's work, just like we did for other works. We are going to try to present it in far more simpler way, in a way which is far more understandable. We should be able to do what Rudyard Kipling does with his words, at least a little bit, maybe 10%, so that it speaks both to emotion and reason at the same time. So that's what I'm hoping to do. So please join us on Mondays for this. And if you want to participate, I wholeheartedly welcome everybody wants to participate. I will brainstorm with you one-on-one to figure out what we can do, how we can do this, and let's do something great. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you soon. such a fantastic thing. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.